Okay, very simply, Tracy is asking, is Matthew 24 talking about rapture or second coming?
Okay. Matthew 24. When you're looking at the passage, there are sections that are talking about the rapture. There are sections that are talking about the second coming. And so this is called the Olivet Discourse, and it's called that because Jesus gave this on the Mount of Olives. And at the very beginning of Matthew 24, verses 1 and 2, it says, Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came up to show him the buildings of the temple. And Jesus said to them, do you not see all these things? Assuredly, I say to you, not one stone shall be left here upon another that shall not be thrown down. Now, as he sat on the Mount of Olives, thus the Olivet Discourse, the disciples came to him privately, saying, tell us, number one, when will these things be? And number two, what will be the sign of your coming? And number three, and of the end of the age. And I don't know that they knew that 2 and 3 were two different things, but those are the questions that they asked Jesus. And when you go through and you look at the Olivet Discourse is expounded on in two main passages, Matthew chapter 24 and Luke chapter 21. And in Luke chapter 21, you have this section that deals with, tell us when will these things be? And it's in that chapter that Jesus goes through and he talks about armies surrounding the city of Jerusalem, and the fact that when they see these armies that they need to get out because Jerusalem is going to be trampled under by Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles is fulfilled. And then he begins talking about the end times. Okay, so that was fulfilled in 70 AD ultimately. Started in 66 AD. But it was fulfilled in 70 AD with the destruction of the city of Jerusalem. And the Christians did leave the city of Jerusalem and get out of there, okay? But when you're in Matthew chapter 24, what he's talking about are signs that are leading up to the second coming, okay? And so you go through verses 4 all the way down to verse 30. And in verse 30, it says, then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven. Then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And then it says, and he will send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they'll gather together his elect from the four winds from one end of heaven to the other. Okay? So, series of signs, wars and rumors of wars. There's going to be plagues, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places. There's going to be tribulation and martyrdom and false prophets and lawlessness and such judgments that if Jesus didn't come back, no flesh would be saved, the abomination of desolation. And so it goes through a series of signs that are going to take place that, by the way, correspond exactly with Revelation chapter 6. The six seals in Revelation chapter 6. And then he wraps it up with the second coming. And then in verse 31, that is not talking about the rapture of the church. Verse 31 is talking about events that take place after the second coming of Christ, where he gathers all the believers on the planet Earth and brings them to the land of Israel for a specific judgment that actually you see in Matthew 25. It's the judgment of the Gentiles and the sheep and the goats judgment. And so the Bible in the Old Testament talks about these nations coming from all over the world. So Isaiah 66:20, Ezekiel 20:34 through 38, Isaiah 27, verses 12 and 13, all speak about that. Okay, then he stops. Okay, so there you have the second coming there. Then he stops and he gives the parable of the fig tree. It says, learn a parable from the fig tree. When you see its leaves, it puts forth leaves, you know that summer is near. So also when you see all these things, know that it is near at the doors. This generation will by no means pass away until all these things are fulfilled. And so I believe that the parable of the fig tree is pointing towards the nation of Israel. In the Old Testament, nations are pictured as trees. Israel specifically is pictured as a fig tree. It's also pictured as a vine and a vineyard, but it's specifically pictured as a fig tree. Other nations are also pictured as trees. And so one of the things that you have in the Old Testament is these alignment of nations that are going to take place during the last days. And the main nation that we need to be paying attention to is the nation of Israel, because the Bible says that Israel would again become a nation in the last days. And I believe that's what that's talking about. And so it's a sign of the end of the age. That's one, and this is where Jesus starts talking about the end of the age. The age that we're in is the church age. And so one of the signs that he gives, I believe is the revival of the nation of Israel. That's something that's going to take place at the end of the age. And then the other thing is this event where two people are in one field, one's taken and the other left. Two women are grinding at one mill, one's taken and the other is left. You tie that in with Luke 17. It's another passage where Jesus is talking about this same event, and he talks about two people being in one bed. One's taken and the other is left. And he says that these events take place just like the days of Noah did, just like the time of the flood. And so they were eating, drinking, marrying, and giving in marriage until the flood came and took them all away. Noah enters into the ark. All these people are taken away in the flood. And then he says, two will be in the field, one will be taken, the other left. Okay. So basically, in this event, it's business as usual. Nobody knows anything's coming. And that's what happened in Noah's flood. And when you go to Luke 17, you have not only Noah's flood being used as an illustration, Jesus also uses Sodom and Gomorrah. The day before Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed, nobody knew that Sodom and Gomorrah were going to be destroyed except for Abraham. And it's because God told him. Nobody else knew. Lot didn't know till the day of. And then he was taken out of that place. And so it was an unexpected event. They were eating, they were drinking, they were buying, they were selling, they were, building houses, that kind of stuff. Unexpected event. That is not what you're going to have right before the second coming of Christ. Right before the second coming of Christ, you've had at least half the population of the earth destroyed in two bouts of warfare. And then you've had a number of other people destroyed through the judgments that God brings down on the earth. The cities are all fallen down. The ocean is dead. You have the sun burning the earth. You have darkness on the kingdom of the beast. And you've got all these events that are taking place. You have the Antichrist rising up and doing the one world government, causing most of the world to worship him and worship Satan literally during that period of time. Those are all events that have to take place before the second coming of Christ. And when you get to the end, there is literally nobody who's not expecting Jesus to come back. They're all prepared. And so you have the kings of the earth who gather together to fight against the second coming of Christ. You have the demons gathering the people of the earth together to fight against the second coming of Christ. The Antichrist is in on all these things. And everybody knows that Jesus is coming back. And again, when you're talking about unbelievers and you're talking about demons, if Christians aren't expecting Christ, they're the only ones who aren't. Again, by the time you get to the second coming. The other thing with this is in this passage, there are people who will say, no, this is not talking about the rapture of the church where the one's taken and the other's left and the one is taken to be with the Lord. And one of the things I want to let you know, and there's some good guys that actually believe that, I don't, and here's why. In this passage, Jesus talks about unexpected event, people marrying and giving in marriage, and again, with that illustration, nobody's planning a barbecue right before the second coming. They're all just trying to stay alive. Nobody's planning a wedding right before the second coming. Everybody's just trying to stay alive. Okay, and so when you're talking about this event, unexpected, just like the guys in the flood. The day before it started raining, nobody knew it was coming except for Noah and the people who heard Noah and didn't believe him, right? And then the flood came and took them all away. And so you have that in verse 39. That phrase, that verb, took them all away, is a verb that means to take away, to remove, to destroy, to kill. It's literally what the verb means. And when you get to the next sentence, it says, Jesus says, then two men will be in the field, one will be taken and the other left, and the verb is changed. And now that verb is a verb that comes from the Greek word paralambano, and it means to take to one's side, to admit, to receive to oneself as a possession for instruction, to carry off. And that's what that word means. And so Jesus changes the verb, and I believe the reason he changes the verb is because these people are going in the rapture. Here's the next reason that I believe that. In Luke's gospel, in chapter 17, it talks about two people in one bed, and obviously we're talking about a man and a woman in the bed, and the Greek will allow that. And so you're talking about a husband and a wife in the bed. By the time you get to the end of the tribulation period, you think the United States is divided? You don't know division. By the time you get to the end of the tribulation period, you literally have Satan worshipers who are worshiping the beast as God. And you think that one of those guys is going to be living with a believer and sleeping with them? And when you're talking about the issue of work, you got women grinding at a mill. That's work, and you've got two men working in a field. This is work. And one of the things that the Bible teaches is that in those days, that believers are not going to be able to buy or sell, or people are not going to be able to buy or sell unless they have the mark of the beast. And so you think employment is going to go on and in exactly the way where you have believers and unbelievers working at the same job. That is not going to be taking place. And so you have a totally different society by the time that you get to the end of the tribulation period. But before the tribulation period, it's business as usual. So before the rapture, business as usual. After the rapture, you have other things going on. And then on top of it, right after this, Jesus gives the parable of the 10 virgins. And again, that's a picture of an unexpected event, expected but unexpected. You don't know the day or the hour. And a bridegroom coming to get his bride, and these bridesmaids, 5 wise, 5 foolish, 5 go, 5 don't, 5 are taken to the father's house. That's where the wedding would take place, and 5 are left out. And so it's a great picture, again, of the rapture of the church. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
I was thinking while you were talking, this isn't a question in here, but have you been watching Israel where the ICC just threatened to put out warrants for Netanyahu's arrest and his Secretary of State for war crimes if they go into Rafah?
Oh.
And the reason I point that out is because you mentioned the fig tree being cursed. And I mean, specifically in my generation, when I was younger, I was born in 1982. You still had anti-Semitism, but there was some World War II leftovers where, people, especially America, we looked at Israel as an ally and a friend and all that stuff. And now, after and the purpose of going into Rafah is to hunt down terrorists that still have people of theirs kidnapped in tunnels.
Right.
And the world looks at them and wants to issue war crimes for them doing what we would have done 207 days ago.
Right, exactly.
And it's fascinating to me.
Yeah, when you're looking at this, another thing that's fascinating about this is that the United States has to get to the point where they will not support Israel.
Right.
And that's
a protest on the aisle.
Yeah, that's the situation that you have in Ezekiel 38. Israel is by itself when they are attacked by Russia and Iran and Turkey and Libya and Ethiopia and so on in that situation, and nobody helps them except for God.
Yeah.
And so we got to get to that point. And so here we are, got a Democrat president, and this is where we go.
One of the big things has been
vote different.
One of the other big things has been the protests on our universities. Just and of course they're all liberal, and a lot of them get funding from different places. But it's been such a voice that it puts political pressure on entities to think and make and say certain things. Because
this whole thing is such a scam. They just went into I can't remember what the hall was at Columbia. But the police just went in there, and major portions of the people who are doing this protest are protesters for hire.
Yep.
That are being paid for by groups like Soros and the Rockefeller Foundation and that kind of thing. These guys are paid anarchists that are going around and doing this stuff. This is disgusting. And then on top of it, you got professors that are involved in this. This can get me going, man. It's like if you're a parent and you're sending your kid to a college. When I sent my son to college, one of the things that I did was I checked out the college to see if they were going to actually teach him something that was worth learning. And these colleges, they're supposed to be upper tier, and they are ridiculous. I can't believe that people are sending their kids there in any, burn them down. These all used to be Christian institutions too, and it's like, burn them down. It's just ridiculous. So
crazy times.
Yeah.
But Matthew 24 times.
Right. Biblical, prophetic implications for all of these.